Hello, Petal. How you doing? How are things? How's it all going? So here is the decision, and the reason being is because there were so many great suggestions, and I wanted to carry on with what we had been doing, but also to take into account what you were looking for as well. Now, it's all down to availability, of course. So certain books are more available than others, but this is an ongoing thing, and as long as you want me to do it, I'll keep on doing. But, as ever, in the comments section, let me know how you're getting on, how you're doing, what's been going on, how you're doing for the holidays, and all that sort of stuff, and I hope you're well. Thank you all so very much for making the live such a great experience. It was so much fun. It was really, really so good. And if you do want to have a look, see if you didn't manage to see it on the day, it is in the live section of the podcast. So you can catch up on it. And it was great fun, and all the more so for the lovely people being there. So I do appreciate you very much, as you know. If you enjoy this little production of mine, please hit the like button, the notifications bell, share and subscribe if you want to. It keeps the lights on. Basically, it keeps it going. But we have such a lovely community here. It's so much fun, and we just love to enjoy the books that we've got. And hopefully there'll be more live streams in the future. Hopefully. We'll just see how it goes. So, Faust Equals, one of Tom Holt's earlier books from 1994, I think. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Apologies for that. The reason I chose this one is because it does have that like little crossover between sort of the kind of Pratchett-esque and the Tom Holt-esque, and then the other writers that we were talking about as well. And of course, the other things we did mention, there are some other books I have already done on my channel, but thank you all so much for contributing to the little community section, because I've written all of those down, and now that I've done that, I've got them there all in one place, and I can refer to it for the next time, or we can just do it each time. I don't mind. Right, this has been 2.5 minutes, so I've got to crack on and start reading this story, because it's a really good one. We like this one that you can read over and over again because it's fantastic. Faust Equals by the amazing Tom Holt, Chapter 1. The Laughing Cod in downtown Hilledrand is rated as one of North East Iceland's premier restaurants, or one of North East Iceland's restaurants. In practice, it amounts to the same thing. On the 364 days each year when the Laughing Cod isn't being a restaurant, you can still walk into the bar and order a coffee. And this is precisely what the most wanted man in history did. 6 of the 7 regulars turned and stared at him as he did so. The 7th, wall-eyed Bjorn, just carried on complaining about herring quotas. Torsten Christiansen, the ever-popular proprietor of the cod, poured the coffee, waited for it to settle, and leant back against the cash register, soaking in the thrill of a new experience. "Just passing through, are you?" he asked after a while. The newcomer looked up. "You could say that," he replied, with only the very faintest trace of an unfamiliar accent. "Could you fix me a toasted sandwich while you're at it?" "Sure," Torsten said, coming right up. He withdrew into the kitchen, wondering what the hell he was doing. It was theoretically possible to get a toasted sandwich in the cod, but you needed references from 2 doctors and a justice of the peace before your application could even be considered. When the stranger had eaten his sandwich, drunk his coffee, and spent about 45 seconds studying the framed photograph of Einar Sigfuson's record grayling on the wall opposite, he stood up and asked for the bill. "The what?" "The bill," repeated the stranger. "Please." "Oh, yes, right. Coming right up. Anybody here got a pencil or something?" There was a brief, stunned silence, which was resolved when the stranger unclipped one from his top pocket and handed it over. Torsten took it as if it was red hot and tentatively pressed the top. "How do you spell coffee?" he asked. The stranger told him, then took the paper from his hands, glanced at it, and fished a banknote out of his shirt pocket, a 10,000 krona note. Hey, said Torsten, when God's marvellous gift of speech had been restored to him, you got anything smaller? The stranger looked at him, took back the note, and put it down on the counter. Then he smiled at it. It began to shrink. You couldn't say how it did it. It just gradually occupied less and less space, until eventually it was about the size of a postage stamp. The stranger picked it up, blew on it, and passed it back across the counter.
Is that better?
He asked. On the other side of death, there's a tunnel leading to an archway. Then the road forks, and this is the point at which you find out whether the ethical system you've been following all these years was the right one after all. Now, if you've backed the Betamax version, you'll come at last to a rather impressive black stone gateway. There is no name or street number, but the chances are that you'll have guessed where you are anyway. However, by way of heavy hint, the gateway bears the celebrated inscription, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." Or so your Michelin guide would have you believe. It's very possible that it still does, but you can no longer see for yourself because the whole of the architrave of the gateway is now covered with a huge banner on which is painted the legend, "Under new management." And when you get up really close, you can see that it actually says, "Under," and inserted in pencil, "entirely new management," just to ram the point well and truly home. At this juncture you will be met by your guide, who will escort you to the ticket office, where you can also purchase guidebooks, souvenir pencils, and locally made coconut ice. The Michelin guide doesn't mention that, but if you think about it, how would they know anyway? Once you've passed the ticket office, your tour will take you all round the justly celebrated architectural gems that comprise the inner courtyard, with the exception of the council chamber, which is not yet open to the public. This is a pity because, apart from the Michelangelo floor, remember where we are, the chamber houses 3 Le Veroneses, a rather fine set of Dürer engravings, and, naturally, the finest collection of works by Hieronymus Bosch in the universe. They are, of course, all portraits, such as may be found in the boardroom of any long-established corporate body. On the day in question, the council was in session and had been for 16 hours. The council members, or board of directors, as we must call them now, each sat under his, her, or its respective portrait, each one looking just the same as he, she, it had when Ronnie Bosch had painted them 600 years previously, except that they were all wearing somewhat self-consciously identical red T-shirts with the words, "Having a damned good time," printed on them in big white letters.
"I still reckon we haven't thought this thing through properly," said the production director stubbornly.
He'd opposed the whole idea of a management buyout from the start and had only come in with the rest of the consortium under considerable pressure.
"Listen, Harry,"
replied the sales director, lashing his tail irritably.
"We know what you think, so you stick to keeping the ovens going, and we'll all get along just fine. You leave the management side to the grown-ups, okay?"
For the record, he'd been the one applying the pressure with a pitchfork in the small of the production director's back.
"Actually," interrupted the admin director wearily, "Harry has got a point there, sorts I mean. It's one thing getting the blasted franchise, keeping it is a different crock of entrails entirely."
The sales director scowled, displaying a wide selection of unlikely components.
"All you can do is make problems," he complained. "We're running a business now, people. I suggest we all remember that, okay?"
"Sure." The finance director nodded what, for the sake of argument, we shall call his head.
"We all know that, Steve. You've told us often enough. I'd just like to remind you that if those bloody inspectors catch us breaking the terms of the franchise, they'll have us out of here like the proverbial pea through a trumpet. Is that what you want?"
The sales director groaned theatrically and paused for a moment to scratch his nose, the one growing up out of his navel, not the one sprouting between his eyebrows.
"Look, Norman," he said, "there's ways around all that stuff. You know that as well as I do. All it takes is a little—"
The finance director shook what he had recently nodded.
"And there's such a thing as being too bloody clever for your own good, Steve. You'd do well to remember that."
He rubbed the bridge of his beak with a thoughtful claw and continued,
"If they think we're not fulfilling the public service part of the deal, but we are, I am not so sure."
"Neither am I," interrupted the production director. "Take the perjury business, for instance. We could have got in serious struck with that."
"I hadn't heard about any perjury stuff,"
murmured the finance director, tapping the edge of the table with his offside front wing.
"Sounds interesting."
The production director grinned unpleasantly. Even for him.
"I'll bet," he said. "Look, in the franchise agreement it says, Clause 9, Subpara 3, all perjurors shall be broken on the wheel, right?"
"Right," agreed the finance director.
"Standard procedure. It's what we've been doing for years. So this dangerous clown here only had the whole department cleared out and 50 roulette tables put in. If I hadn't found out about 3 days before the last random check—" "I still don't know what you're getting so uptight about," growled the sales director. "A wheel's a wheel, right? And I can guarantee the whole lot of them were broke by the time—"
He subsided under the glare of the finance director's 6 beady red eyes and took a sudden interest in the pencil on the table in front of him.
"That," said the finance director, "is definitely going too far. As," he added sharply, "is this idea of changing the name of the place to Netherglades Theme Park. How the hell am I meant to explain that to the inspectors, Steve? A smear campaign by the printers."
The sales director sniffed. Quite an achievement, considering.
"Come on now," he said. "Even a bunch of blinkered concrete-brained civil servants is going to realise the importance of image in a business like this. You honestly believe the punters are going to be able to relate to the image we've got at the moment? I mean, would you fork out good money if you thought you were going to get your lungs ripped out with a blunt meat hook?"
"But that's the business we're in, Steve." The sales director waved an impatient talon.
"So we're an awful lot of people, Norman. That's not the point. The point is you can torture the punters and race them alive and coop them up in confined spaces indefinitely and flay them on spits, and they'll still fall over themselves to give you money, just so long as you can convince them it is fun. That's what the holiday industry's all about, Norman, just so long as your image is okay."
"I think we'll have to agree to disagree on this one for the time being," said the finance director smoothly. "I mean, there's obviously good arguments on both sides. Yes, we have to watch our backs as far as the inspectors are concerned. On the other hand, we've got a bloody good compliance record as far as everything else is concerned. Like, waiting lists cut, catering costs reduced by half, maintenance schedules improved, security as good as ever." There was a soft cough from his left. If the head of security had had a head, it had shaken it.
"To a certain extent, yes,"
he muttered. The finance director turned round sharply, and his horns twitched, a sure sign of impending trouble. "What do you mean, a certain extent?" he demanded. "Look, either nobody's escaped, or—"
"I was coming to that."
As the echo of the report died away, a faint breeze dissipated the remaining wisps of smoke, revealing that, against all the odds, the Vampire King was still on his feet.
"Hmm,"
he croaked.
I'm not sure how many points you scored for that.
On the other side of the valley, Kurt Mad Dog Lundqvist blinked, swore quietly under his breath, and reached into his top pocket for another silver bullet. Nothing. Just a compass, a pearl-handled switchblade, and a roll of peppermints.
"Okay," he called out. "You want to do this the hard way? That's fine by me."
A few seconds later, they were facing each other, mano a mano in the sand. Lundqvist could see that the Vampire King was sweating now, his face more than usually drawn, his teeth protruding just a telltale smidgen more. All the king could see was the flash of the noon sun on Lundqvist's mirror Ray-Bans.
"It's not like you to miss the heart at 400 yards, Kurt,"
muttered the king. It was intended as a taunt, but Lundqvist accepted it as a statement of fact, which, of course, it was.
"It's this goddamn awful rifle," he replied. "Comes of trying to do 2 jobs at once, I guess. You ready?"
The king backed away.
"How do you mean, 2 jobs exactly?"
"I promised the guys at Terminator Monthly I'd do a write-up on the new Macmillan .30. Nothing like actually testing the bugger in the field, I always say. Ready yet?"
The Vampire King looked round. He was 600 years old, completely invulnerable to anything except silver bullets and fire-hardened yew, with the strength in his hideously attenuated body of 9 rogue elephants. He was also shit scared.
"We don't have to do this, you know," he mumbled. "We can just walk away and—"
Lundqvist shook his head, a tiny, precise movement. The peak of his cap came up level with the king's 3rd nipple. He tested the balance of the mallet in his right hand.
"Sorry, Vlad," he said. "A contract's a contract. Nothing personal."
Maybe the king's mistake was to try and rush him, or maybe he didn't make a mistake at all. When you've met your match, that's it. No shame, no dishonour, just the natural course of events. In any case, there was a short blur of activity, a thud, the hollow sound of mallet head on stake. And that was that. As 6 vindictive centuries caught up with the Vampire King, he raised his head one last time and tried to give Lundqvist the stare. All that happened was that he got the stare back. With interest.
"Just tell me, Kurt,"
he croaked with the last of his breath.
"Why the hell do you do it?"
"The money, Vlad. So long."
When it was all finally over, Lundqvist got to his feet, wiped the stake off on a patch of couch grass, and stuck it back in his belt. There were times, he realised, when the job did get to him, although he found it hard to admit it to himself. Not the danger, of course, or the incessant conflict with hideous and unnatural monsters, or the mind-bending horrors he came face to face with every day of his life. Certainly not the killing. When a man is tired of killing, he is tired of life. No, Lundqvist said to himself as he took the vampire's severed head under his arm, shouldered the rifle, and started the long walk back to the jeep.
"I guess what really bothers me most is the lack of excitement."
The most wanted man in history, wishing to get from Iceland to Holland and having no transport of his own, had hitched a lift. Nothing unusual in that, except that he'd hitched it off an airliner. Now, since there's virtually nowhere in Iceland where you can put down a 747 without breaking bits off it, the fugitive had left it hovering about 4 feet off the ground on a cushion of pink cloud. With a little grunt of effort, he jumped up, caught the pilot's door, wrenched it open, and swung inside the cabin.
"Hi," he said cheerfully. "Thanks for stopping."
The pilot looked at him, eyes rimmed over with incredulous terror. What he wanted to say was, "Who are you? What's happening? Have you the faintest idea what's going to happen to me when the Federal Aviation boys find out I dumped my plane in a volcanic desert just because some guy stuck his thumb out?" What actually came out was, "I can take you as far as Skilpole if that's any good to you."
"Skilpole's fine,"
replied the fugitive, dropping his rucksack on the floor and flopping into the wireless operator's chair.
"Thanks a lot."
Without the pilots having to do anything, The engines roared, the idiot lights on the console flickered into angry, bewildered life, and the pink cloud slowly floated up to around about 10,000 feet. Normal service will be resumed as soon as possible. The wireless operator and the co-pilot took an early lunch.
Going far?
The pilot asked, as the plane resumed its flight. He was dimly aware of a heavy, oppressive force lying across large areas of his mind, like a sleeping cat on the knees of an impatient visitor, blanking off those part of his brain that might want to raise such issues as, what in God's name is going on here? Dimly aware, however, but as no parsnips.
Just bumming around, really, the fugitive replied, and Amsterdam's as good a place as any for that, as far as I'm concerned.
Another thought that was hammering vainly on the locked door of the pilot's consciousness was, hang on, why am I taking this nerd to Amsterdam when this flight's supposed to be going to Geneva? It hammered and hammered and hammered, and nobody came.
Very much a fun place, Amsterdam, from what I've heard,
the pilot's voice agreed.
Not that I've been there for 15 years, I suppose. Not to stop. Anyway, been travelling long?
Flight AR675, flight AR675, come in, please. Urgent. Come in, please.
Yammered the radio. Sundry captives in the coal cellar of the pilot's mind tried using a big chunk of basic survival instinct as a battering ram, but all they did was hurt their shoulders.
I move about,
replied the fugitive, looking out of the window at the North Sea.
Born under a wandering star, that sort of thing.
Flight AR675, flight AR675, what the flying fuck do you think you're doing up there? Are your instruments shot or what?
The pilot turned to his passenger.
Should I answer that, do you think? They seem rather uptight about something. I shouldn't bother, the fugitive replied. They'll call back later if it's important. I guess so.
The pilot leaned forward and twiddled a dial on the console. The voice of Oslo Air Traffic Control was abruptly replaced by Radio Osselberg's Music Through the Night. By virtue of some sort of ghastly air bubble in the stream of probability, they were playing Riders in the Sky.
Do you know, said the pilot after a while, something tells me that if we carry on this course much longer, we'll be violating Swedish airspace. Do you think they'll mind? I don't think so, replied the fugitive firmly. Nice people, the Swedes.
At which point 2 massively armed Saab Viggens were scrambled out of Burka and screamed like stainless steel banshees northeast on a direct interception course.
Very expensive country, though, the pilot was saying. I had to buy a pair of shoes there once, and do you know how much they cost? Just ordinary black lace-up walking shoes, nothing fancy. You don't say. And coffee's absolutely astronomical. Absolutely astronomical, of course. Not so bad in the little backstreet cafes and things, of course, but in the hotels.
Unidentified aircraft, unidentified aircraft. Here is calling to Svensk Air Force. Turn back immediately, or down you will be shot. Message down, you will be.
Would you like me to talk to them? Suggested the fugitive. Gosh, would you mind? That's extremely kind of you. No problem.
The pilot of Gamma Delta Alpha 539 set his jaw, repeated the message one last time for luck, and programmed the weapon systems. First, a 5-round burst from the twin 20 Miller Erklikons, and then a couple of heat seekers, and then back home in time for a quick beer before the press conferences.
Calling Gamma Delta Alpha 539. Come in, please.
The pilot was a relatively humane man, but he couldn't help just a teeny tiniest twinge of disappointment deep down in the nastier bits of his repressed psyche.
Receiving unidentified aircraft, turn back immediately, or...
The radio crackled.
Yes, thanks,
it said.
Do you know your flight's undone?
Proof, if proof were needed, that technology has outgrown the ability of mankind to control it. At the end of the day, even a really first-class piece of state-of-the-art hardware needs a human to steer it. And
That human must inevitably be subject to fundamental human instinctive behaviour, such as, for example, quickly glancing down to check his zip, but in the third of a second that takes, a modern Class 1 fighter bomber can get seriously out of hand.
Good Lord,
exclaimed the pilot of the 747.
that fighter nearly crashed into that other fighter. Whoopsie.
Butterfingers, agreed the fugitive.
I do hope they'll be all right. I expect so. Marvellous things, ejector seats.
You wouldn't get me in one of those things without one. The fugitive craned his neck slightly to look at the sea.
Expensive pieces of kit, these modern warplanes, I expect.
Very.
Waterproof?
I assume so.
That's all right then.
Lundqvist strode into the tiny branch sheriff's office in Las Monedas and banged the bell until it broke. Then he shouted. The deputy on duty doubled as the postmaster, the trading standards officer, the funeral director, one of the town's 2 chartered accountants, and the blacksmith's assistant. It was therefore several minutes before he was able to answer.
The reward on these 2,
snapped Lundqvist.
In cash, and I want a receipt.
The deputy looked up at the 2 severed heads and quickly ran a mental scan through his various portfolios to ascertain which one was actually relevant. It was easy enough to narrow the field down to 2 alternatives, and relatives bringing loved ones to Las Monedas' funeral parlour generally tended to have rather more of the bits.
Hold on,
he said. From under the desk he produced a receipt book and a blue cap with red piercings marked Federalis. It was entirely the wrong uniform, of course, but this was the sticks. You had to make do with what you could get.
Vampires,
said Lundqvist, patiently. Well, by his standards, at least.
This one's Vlad the indefinitely respawned, and this one...
He broke off and glanced at the label hanging from the left ear.
This one here is Count Boris Vilashiny. I've got the ISBN details somewhere, if that's any help. Just a moment, replied the deputy, thumbing through a loose-leaf binder. Vlad. There's a lot of Vlads, isn't there? Ah, right. Here you go. Vlad the indefinitely respawned. Hey, Category 3. Not bad. What did you say the other one was? Count Boris Vilashiny. The 2 S's in Vilashiny. Sorry, that doesn't seem to be here. Try the supplement. Yes. Right. No, not in here either. Okay. Try looking under zombies. Right. Yeah, here we are. Category 4A. The deputy frowned. Sorry, he said, but we don't keep that much cash in the office. Bank is still open. Or the country, come to that. You could try America just up the road and turn left. They might be able to help.
Lundqvist sighed.
Fuck that, he said. I guess I'll just have to take a check. I'll need to see your license and some proof of identity.
Lundqvist growled ominously.
Here is the license. Thanks. That all seems to be in order. How about this proof of identity?
With no apparent exertion whatsoever, Lundqvist picked the deputy up one-handed by the lapels, held him about 2 inches from the tip of his nose, and treated him to a long, special stare.
Is that okay? That'll do nicely, Mr. Lundqvist.
There was a brief interval while the deputy laboriously wrote out a cheque, during which time Lundqvist amused himself by shuffling through the file of wanted posters on the desk. Since they were a trifle behind the times at Las Monedas, the file read more like Lundqvist Curriculum Vitae. Curriculum Mortis. Theodore Fang's Lupo, March 1992, Guatemala. Trouble getting his pelt over the border, Lundqvist recalled, because the endangered species byproducts regulations. Ironic, since it was largely due to his efforts that werewolves were endangered in the first place. Ramesses IV, July 1992, in Cairo, one of the few contracts that had given any real degree of job satisfaction. It's amazing what these new high-tech wallpaper paste could do with 3,000-year-old papyrus bandages. Aldazor, Lord High Marshal of the Infernal Hosts, August 1992, Akron, Ohio. A miserable job, that. And he was still getting letters from the Vatican legal department about infringement of copyright. Copyright bullshit. Show me a priest who uses Bell Buck and 20mm recoilless rifle and then sue me. With a sigh, Lundqvist flicked through the rest of the file. Nothing but the commonplace, the routine, the uninspiring, the run-of-the-mill. For a man who had got into this line of work purely for the adrenaline rush of living on the edge, he was spending far too much time pottering about in the epicentre. And then he stopped. He turned back.
Wow. Hey, he said, how long's this one been out? Don't remember seeing it before.
The deputy looked up over the rims of his spectacles. They belonged to his great-grandfather, and it was a moot point as to whether the myopia that ran in his family was cause or effect.
Ah, that one,
he replied.
That's new. A man delivered it specially. When?
The deputy thought for a moment.
3 days ago, he said. Maybe 4. It was the day little Pepe's mule cast a shoe, and Miguel sent the telegram to San Felipe. Thanks.
With a swift movement, Lundqvist snapped open the file, removed the flyer, and snapped the file shut.
I think I'll just borrow this for a while, he said. You don't mind, do you?
Before the deputy could answer, Lundqvist had folded the flyer away, snatched his cheque, and hurried out. In the cantina, over a triple hot chili and a jug of coarse red, Lundqvist studied the flyer in detail.
Wanted,
and then a space, and in big old-fashioned letters,
past or present.
They keep that typeface, especially for wanted posters. And then a blurred photograph. But the face was already familiar. More than that, it had been an unshiftable great pit behind the dental plate of Lundqvist's professional pride for more years than he cared to remember. And then the name, and the aliases. The most wanted man in history. And then the reward. There were so many notes it looked like the string of bubbles left behind by a swimming otter. Lundqvist nodded gravely, finished his chili, and lit a cigar. Yeah, the challenge. Yes, the adrenaline rush. Yes, the chance to settle a really big old score. And yes, oh yes indeed, the money. I love this book. It's been so long since I read it. I've got to check out when it actually came out. I think it was 1994, if I remember rightly. I'm sure I was either 19 or 20 when I read it. I'm positive, in fact. It's like, I really should have just looked at the book itself. That would have been a really good idea, wouldn't it? So, let me know what you think. Are you enjoying this one? Do you think it's going to be good? What do you reckon? Have you read it before? What do you think? Either way, take care of yourself. Take it easy. Have a good rest. Get some good sleep when you can. And, yeah. I'll get back to normal procedures on the next one. I promise. I'll kind of be doing all my little tunes and whatnot. But I just wanted to get this one out to you today, just to make sure that I'd had it all ready and sorted and stuff. So, yes, please let me know how you're getting on. Please have a good rest if you can. Hit the subscribe and share button, like and hit notifications, all that blether, all that sort of thing. Yay! And we'll look forward to the next time that we can bring you chapter 2 of Faust Among Equals by Tom Holt. Take it easy, Petal. Have a lovely, lovely day.